is introduced to us as the confessed, self-righteous man. Now the story changes, and we get to the serious realities that our Lord wants us to understand in verse 13 when we meet the second character in the story. But the tax gatherer, standing some distance away, was even unwilling to lift up his eyes to heaven, but was beating his breast, saying, God, be merciful to me, the sinner. Here is a very different approach. Very different. The tax collectors were the most hated people in Israel, cut out of all religious activity and social relationships because of what they had done as traitors to their religion and their nation. They are the most defiled. They are, in the eyes of the people, the farthest from God. And it isn't just the profession that bothers people, it's how they carry it off. They were corrupt, they were swindlers, they were unjust, unrighteous, and they were surrounded by the scum and the riffraff and the adulterers and prostitutes of society. And so this is the worst sinner Jesus can portray in this brief story, as he has already used the Pharisee to present the most righteous man he could portray. Now let's look at this tax collector. First of all, his location. Verse 13, standing some distance away. Macarthur. Macro means far away, distant, far off. Where the Pharisee is as close to the holy place as he can get. He's in the inner court. He's as close to the location symbolically where the presence of God resides as he can get, because in his own mind he belongs there. That's where he should be. That's where he wants people to see him. And he thinks he's attained that. He's earned it. On the other hand, this man is far off. He is Macarthur. He is way off on the fringe, on the outer edge. Why? Because he knows he doesn't deserve to be in the presence of God, or even the presence of those who are righteous. He is rejected. He is a traitor. But more than that, he is a sinner. He is a pariah, not only to the society, but he is a pariah to God. He is a pariah in his own mind and his own heart. He has no right to draw near to God, and he knows that. This is humility. This is a sense of alienation, and it's revealed in his location. But secondly, it's revealed also in his posture. Please notice, he was even unwilling to lift up his eyes to heaven. Contrary to the Pharisee, who was happy to stand with his arms up, open-faced, looking to God, assuming and manifesting that he would certainly be acceptable to God and could look eyeball to eyeball with God, this man will not even lift up his eyes to heaven, meaning toward God. He is overwhelmed with guilt. He is overwhelmed with shame, and it shows up in his posture. He knows he is unworthy. He is a swindler. He is unjust, dishonest, a cheat, corrupt, immoral, irreligious. He is a law breaker. He knows it. He feels it. He believes it, and he confesses it. And there's not even a hint of the attitude that might say, well, I know I'm a sinner, but at least I'm here at the temple, so I'm better than most tax collectors I know. He feels the full weight of his alienation from God. It's not just about being alienated from the society because of his profession. It's about being alienated from God because of his sin and disobedience and lawlessness. He has that sense of alienation. He feels that weight of sin and brokenness, that accompanying conviction and remorse. He experiences pain and fear and dread of deserved punishment and judgment. His location says it, and so does his posture. Thirdly, so does his behavior. His behavior is, frankly, quite unique. It says he was beating his breast, or beating his chest. A study of Jewish history, a study of Jewish social life, a study of the way Jews behaved themselves in ancient times, as well as even up until modern times in the Middle East, will tell you that one of the ways that people prayed was to put their hands over their chest and put their eyes down. This, historically, according to Edersheim, the great scholar of New Testament times, was a posture of humility, crossing the hands, bowing the eyes. But this man goes beyond that. This man does something that is unusual. A gesture familiar in Middle Eastern culture even today, as it has been for millennia, but still unusual. His hands on his chest, his eyes down, he begins to turn his hands into fists and pound his chest rapidly and repeatedly. This is a gesture that is used to express the most extreme sorrow, the most extreme anguish. We find it in Jewish history. We do not find an illustration of it in the Old Testament. We find references to it in Jewish commentaries, ancient Jewish commentaries, but not in the Old Testament. Jesus has this Pharisee do it here in this story, but there's only one other place in the New Testament where it happens. Turn to the 23rd chapter of Luke. The 23rd chapter of Luke. It is at the cross of Christ, just after Jesus died. And verse 48, all the multitudes who came together for this spectacle, the crucifixion of Christ, when they observed what had happened, began to return, beating their breasts, pounding repeatedly and rapidly their chests. There has never been a more horrific event than the cross. There therefore could never be a place where there would be more profound anguish than at the cross. And there, men and women who were there to see that reacted in this dramatic way.
You're listening to John Macarthur, president of the Master's College and Seminary and featured Bible teacher on Grace to You. Today's lesson is a part of his new series, Who Can Be Right with God? Well, as John noted today, the tax collector was on the lowest rung of society, a despised outcast. In fact, many times the people Jesus commended in his parables and those to whom he extended grace in his earthly ministry were rejected by society, just like the tax collector and assorted sinners. John, why is that?
Yeah, well, that's the whole picture in the Gospels. You have the religious elite, the Pharisees,